Great news! We are making progress on the climate change. It's so easy nowadays to find the bad news. You just open your phone, check the news, and you will see a new record of high temperature and flooding happening somewhere, or a lack of water in new regions. And it's so easy to get depressed. And it's so hard to see the progress we are making. It's hard to see a direction. Because who is talking about the progress, who is talking about the direction, is not easy to find, is not easy to spot. Recently, Bill Gates made a new article called The Clean Industrial Revolution. In this video, I want to talk about this article. I did my own research of what are the great news that Bill Gates is talking about in this article, and I want to describe them and give my own perspective. I'm also thinking to make a second video in the future where I talk about the other aspects that are missing in the Clean Industrial Revolution that are very important. Honestly, I'm very excited about the topic because it's an interesting topic and it's a very interesting challenge that humanity is facing, and we should be happy to face it. If you are interested on knowing what are the new progress we have made and you want to see what's in the future, what we can do for the future, I think you should definitely watch this video. Bill Gates describes 5 grand challenges. These 5 grand challenges are basically the division of the most important elements that produce emissions in the world. This video will follow the same structure and we'll talk about each grand challenge. Let's go. Manufacturing is responsible of the 30% of the emission of CO2. Manufacturing means basically how we make almost everything. How we build stuff and how we use the material. How we produce the material to make everything. In particularly, we are going to focus on 2 of the most used materials, which are concrete and steel. The main problems of those materials is in the chemistry. Basically, to produce this material, there is a chemical reaction that involves production of CO2. It's almost unavoidable. There are 2 ways to face this. One way is to recycle and use less of those materials, which is something that we can always, of course, trying to do. And the second part is doing more research on trying to optimize the process to minimize the use of CO2 or actually eliminate the use of CO2. So we have very interesting news. Let's start from the concrete. So concrete is made from limestone and heat. So we need to heat the limestone to produce basically the cement and CO2. This process, unfortunately, is unavoidable. Like, the production of CO2 is very difficult to eliminate. One of the first solution that we have comes from a company called CarbonCure. CarbonCure basically provides a solution by injecting CO2 in the material in a procedure called basically CCUS, carbon capture utilization storage. So the idea is that we don't remove the CO2 from the production, but at the end, when we are actually casting the concrete, we inject CO2 that remains crystallized in the material. And has been proven that even after demolition, the CO2 will remain in the material. So the way this is going to be used is like with carbon credit. So 1 carbon credit is equivalent to 1 ton of CO2 removed from the atmosphere. So companies can basically buy a carbon credit by using this technology, offsetting the production of CO2. Obviously, it's not the ideal solution, but it's still an important help that we can give to the environment. More interesting is actually the second solution that Bill Gates introduces, which is the ACT concrete from the company Ecosem. This company actually has figured out which element of the cement is more responsible for the CO2, and is the clinker. The clinker is basically the glue that puts together all the material within the concrete and is responsible of 90% of the emission of CO2 from the concrete. Well, what this technology managed to do is managed to replace the clinker with a material with low CO2 requirement, reducing the emission with a percentage up to 90%. They are using a mix of plasticizers and local material that we can easily use. They claim that their technology doesn't require big changes in the industry. It can be any existing industry can be easily changed to use this new technology. This is really a revolution. Talking about reducing the 90% at the origin is really, really good. Much different than the previous solution where we are just injecting CO2, which is also a good one. Talking about the other material, the steel. Steel is a bit different than concrete. So steel is an amazing material. It is infinitely recyclable, it is very strong and ductile, and is applied in so many applications, in your laptop, in your car, in the canned goods, everywhere. In the medical equipments, you can use steel for everything. The problem is that to produce steel, we need iron. And when we find iron in nature, we find iron ore, which is a mix of iron and many minerals, including oxygen. So to produce steel, we need a lot of heat, okay? A lot of heating energy. And this heating energy is provided by coke, which is basically a type of coal, which is a fossil fuel, very cheap. And in the process, the heating comes from the coke, and the production is cheap thanks to this material. So the issue is to remove the coke and find an easy way to produce produce a lot of electricity. This solution comes from a company called Boston Metal. Boston Metal have found something really incredible. They managed to find a way to remove the coke from the equation. Basically, they created a chamber when they put an electrolyte, which, to make it simple, is a fluid with particular features, but a fluid is water, okay? And in this fluid, they put the iron ore, and in the chamber there is a cathode and an anode, and there is basically a transmission of electricity. The transmission of electricity raises the temperature in the electrolyte and makes the creation of the steel that goes at the bottom, of the molten iron that goes at the bottom. And the production is, the side production is only oxygen. So in this process there is no CO2 produced. It's huge, it's a huge improvement. The problem that they have is basically the two elements, the cathode and the anode, in particular the anode, because the anode can easily react when the electricity passing through. So the challenge for the scientists working in Boston Metal is to find an alloy material that allows to minimize these reactions and basically make the technology scalable and reusable in long term. The second problem here is that this works with electricity. Okay, what does it mean? Well, electricity is produced by fossil fuel, so if we need to make more renewable energy. That's the point, because if you're gonna use electricity and electricity is produced by fossil fuel, we are not making any change. So that's the critical aspect that we should consider. Electricity is responsible for up to 29% of global emissions. When we think about electricity, we think about renewable energies, and we know that the renewable energies are improving nowadays. We have much better efficiency in the wind turbines and in the solar panels, and these numbers are increasing every day. Also, these technologies are spreading around the world. We are building more and more of these infrastructures. But there is a side aspect that we are not considering, which is the intermittency and reliability of this system, which basically means we don't always have wind and we don't always have sun for different reasons. Wind is variable, and sun, obviously, we don't have it at night, and we can have days of overcast where basically we have very little cover of sunlight. How can we overcome to this? What can we do for it? One solution is to use nuclear plant systems. I'm not going to talk about this for long, but nuclear plant systems have been judged wrongly from the past, from the popular opinion of the catastrophic events we have seen. But the reality is that it's a very safe technology, and nowadays we have a very high level of risk assessment that can allow us to use it, and I'll use it in a safe way. I will say, and Bill Gates says, that it's almost unavoidable that we need to use it, so we must use it. A second solution will be using the gas plant system and turning on them only at nights or when required, with an additional carbon capture system that basically neglects the introduction of CO2 in the air. This is a second solution. But what can we do nowadays to improve the system? The solution comes from two companies. The first one is Form Energy. Form Energy basically provides a system of batteries that gives complement to the lithium, complementary to the lithium battery we know. Basically, what we are gonna do is a system similar to the video game Cliff Empire. I imagine that most of the people watching this video wouldn't know what Cliff Empire is. Cliff Empire is a game, and a very interesting game that I recommend, by the way, where the humanity lives on top of cliffs and using renewable energies as a form of electricity. And what they do is you can produce batteries so that when you have a shortage of energy from sun or wind, you have batteries to introduce in the system and basically overcome the problem of lack of energy. So what we are going to do in the future is exactly this. We need to store the additional energy we have when we have much more wind and much more sun, and use it when we have a lack of it through batteries. And we don't have right now a good battery to do that. And Form Energy is providing this new battery that basically uses rust cycles. So basically the battery breathes in oxygen and is rusting iron when is discharging energy, and is doing the opposite when is charging energy. Is basically removing the rust from the iron and is breathing out oxygen. This system basically is very good because of the modularity. So basically every battery is like of the size of a dishwasher, and we can pile one on top of the other, basically making a lot of storage in a small area. One of the consequences I think that should be investigated, and this comes related to the electricity, to the steel production we saw before, is that all the system produces oxygen, and they tend to introduce oxygen in the atmosphere. I'm imagining a future where we use those technologies on a big scale, and actually we introduce a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere. I think we should carefully consider what are the consequences on the atmosphere, on the ecosystem of on the plants and animals living around those facilities. So maybe it's not a big problem, but I think we should be careful to what we do with this oxygen. The second solution, the second important development, comes from a company called TS Conductor. Well, the solution is very simple but quietly unexpected. Basically, we haven't done any improvement in the conduction of the energy in the last 100 years. This company has provided a new cable system, basically a new system of transmission of the energy that, and by the way, the transmission of the energy is responsible for 1/3 of the cost of the electricity, so it's a big part. And this system basically provides 3 times more capacity in the peak event and a loss of energy of 50%, plus much more durability. This is a huge improvement for different reasons, because we are going to build more and more of an electricity system around the world where countries are developing, like Asia and Africa. But also there is an implicit fact on using renewable energies. Renewable energies are not going to be produced far away from cities. So we need to basically transmit the energy from those far places to the cities. And we need a reliable system. And the reliable system is a new system of cables. There is a side effect that is important to consider, and I'm not elongate a lot on this, but is if we use less energy for transmitting the energy is going to reduce in cost. But here's where we need to be careful, because we have seen from the past that anytime we reduce a cost, it doesn't mean automatically that we are going to use less energy, because the demand increases automatically. It's called the Jevons paradox. We might talk about this on a separate video. Agriculture makes an impact for 20% of the total emissions. On this emission, more than half comes from deforestation. And the deforestation is responsible of basically the removal of a carbon sink, which is basically the effect of the trees that capture CO2. And the second effect is that by removing the trees, we release the carbon that is normally in the soil. Another part comes from food wastage. Every day we are responsible of wasting 30% of the food we produce, which is an incredibly huge number, which is a big problem in the modern society. We should discuss more about this in a separate video. Another feature, another problem, another part of the agriculture that produces CO2 comes from fertilizers. So fertilizers in their natural form comes from manure of pigs and cows. Well, this fertilizers is a big producer of CO2 because is in this fertilizer chemistry, basically there is a production of CO2. So we should avoid to use the natural one for the system. Then we have the synthetic one. The synthetic one has a particular and kind of complex system where basically we introduce microbes that basically we introduce ammonia that makes some breakups in the plant, producing the elements that the plants need. The problem is that those microbes that produce those elements stop to produce them when the fertilizer, when there is a lot of it surrounding the plant. So basically we need to produce a lot of fertilizer, and most of it gets wasted. And this wasted fertilizer goes in the water system with many problems causing in the ecosystem, such as a high production of seaweeds in the ocean that causes lack of oxygen. It's the scale, the chain of effect is huge. One solution comes from the company called Pivot Bio. Basically what they do is they are using genetic engineering to edit the microbes system to produce ammonia even when there is nitrogen in surrounding the plant. So by doing this, basically the microbe will produce exactly the amount of nitrogen required by the plant and won't produce more. And the microbes will die with the plant because they live in symbiosis with the plant. This system works well and is already been tested with wheat and corn. But I have a personal doubt about the system that comes from the precautionary principle. What I'm wondering is, what are the risks of this? Can we see them? I don't think we can. I'm wondering, what if this type of microbes then goes into our ecosystem and changes our ecosystem? Because then we will have these microbes that basically will produce always ammonia even when there is nitrogen around them. What if they get released in the system and they make variation that we don't know? I think we should be very careful to this. I will probably talk about this in a separate video because there is a lot to talk. But the system is really good, but there is a lot of risk that we are not aware. We should be careful. That's my personal opinion. Anyway. A second, another source of emission is, to put very bluntly, the poop of cows or farts from the cows. Well, cows basically have a complex system of digestion. They have 4 chambers, and when they basically eat the grass, they basically make different chemical reaction that produce methane. That is similar. It actually has a much larger effect than CO2 on the climate change. So the good solution that this company has found, Ruminate, with the game of words, is using a chemical compound coming from a seaweed, and with the particularity that they are not producing the seaweed, a lot of those seaweeds, but they are producing just the chemical from one single plant. So this single element is introduced in the diet of the cows and is reducing the production of methane from the cows by up to 90%. In a big range, starting from 25% reduction to 90%, depending if the animal is feeding with grain or grass, with the grain being more effective. Again, I am a bit afraid of this system for 2 particular aspects. The first one is, we don't know the effect on the animals. Okay, we might say that the animal doesn't seem to be affected, but we don't know in the long term. So I think we should be careful and we should investigate the effect on the animal. Second effect is, what was the consequences of the dispersion of this different type of feeding on the animals, if makes an impact of the ecosystem. Again, the precautionary principle should be applied on those systems, and we should be very careful to the risks that we are running. Transportation is responsible for 16% of the CO2 emissions. One of the first thing comes to our head is electric vehicles. Okay, half of the vehicles are private vehicles, and we are already in a good shape on meaning we have already in a good shape, meaning we have already solutions for going to a total CO2 free solution in the next years. We have the technology, it's improving, it's becoming more accessible, cheaper, and the governments are trying to push this on becoming more and more mandatory. The rest, we have 1/3 coming from medium-sized vehicle, and this is already in a good shape, because we know that we can electrify buses and medium-sized trucks, the trucks that basically runs in our cities. We have a problem in the heavy truck systems, where the electrified system doesn't work very well, and we are working in a few solutions. Now, if we think about those vehicles, one of the problems is that we need a lot of materials to produce the batteries for those vehicles. And the solution comes from one company called Redwood Battery Recycles. Basically, this company provides a system of recycling existing devices, any type of technology devices, to recover 90%, actually 95% of the material, in a way that is much more effective and produces less emission than the usual system, between 40 and 70% less emission of the normal system. This is huge because we are going to need a lot of material. One of the problems is that requires awareness of the population on recycling, requires habit on the population of recycling what we have. This company in the United States is providing a lot of help on doing this. So it's providing campaign for educating the population, but it's also giving tools to people that want to spread this information, and for example allows you the creation of private events where devices are collected, giving information on how to store them and even giving the tools to collecting them. I think there is a lot of education required on this, and we need to do a lot on the side of the education, and this company is trying to do is to put the effort on this aspect. Obviously, because they need to make a profit, so they need this material, but the fact they need to make a profit is pushing them on providing tools for all the population to be more aware of this, which is a good side effect. In Europe, we have a similar system called WEEE, W-E-E-E. Sorry for the bad joke, but I had to do it. Which is proposing something similar, but in a more vague way, I have to say, because it depends on every country in the European system. I admit I haven't done a lot of research, but I've seen that it's confusing to find information on this aspect in Europe. Another important aspect of transportation comes from how we collect the minerals around our world. In the current state, basically, we have already used all the deposits of mineral that are easy to find. But we know that there are many others that are underground and are hard to find. Find those spots is difficult because we don't have data, we have very little data, and requires basically luck. At the moment is based on that, on luck. A new company called Cobalt is providing a solution. The solution is basically to use advanced data science, so basically a combination of data, statistics, and AI combined together to basically locate the best possible location where to find the minerals. This is going to be really helpful to improve the production of minerals. One of the things comes to my head in this technology is I will be careful to the impact on the ecosystem. Possibly, if we could have such algorithm, we should probably improve our algorithm to find also the place that minimizes the impact on the ecosystem. Not only an optimization of finding more mineral. We should try to learn the lesson that we need to live well with this planet. So I think this should be, it's my personal suggestion on the system. Finally, on transport, we have aviation. On aviation, there is a very interesting company called Zero Avia, which is a company that is introducing a hydrogen-based engine. They are trying new engines on all retrofitting in all the models, and they are already testing those engines that are working very well. It's very promising. In the future, we expect to have new models based on these engines. One important part of this system is that it's because of using hydrogen, it's going to use lower temperature than the normal engine. So it's going to provide a much more resistant and durable engine. And we know that as soon as we get a good engine system, we are going to reduce the CO2 emission between 70 and 90%, according to a study of the Clear Sky from Europe, an European research agency. Obviously, the hydrogen is gonna be cheaper than the jet kerosene, but we need to be careful because to produce hydrogen, we need energy and electricity, basically, and the electricity needs to come from renewable energy. It comes always to this point. We need to electrify everything we are doing to make everything working, but the electricity needs to be clean. The last grand challenge is buildings. Buildings are responsible for 7% of the emissions. We count nowadays 1.5 billion of air conditioning system. We plan to have basically by 2050 5 billion of air conditioning system. If we think about what we're going to do with air conditioning to improve the system is, first of all, we need research on the F gases, which are gases used to make this air conditioning work. And there is a lot of research going on producing gases that are less impactful on the ecosystem. And the second thing is, to heat and cool houses, we need electrified heating or cooling down system, because then the electricity can come from renewable energies. That's where the best solution possible. Right now we know that heating, for example, is very difficult to achieve where oil and natural gas are prevalent, but in the future we need to achieve this. What we can do, though, is improve the efficiency of our buildings. For this, we have two companies producing new technology that are going to help on this. The first one is Luxwall, which produces basically high-performing windows that are capable to increase the heating efficiency by 45% and the cooling efficiency by 25%. They are basically they are based on a system of vacuum, and they provide an incredible reduction basically on the normal system that we use for windows. One of my concern on this is the tightness of the building, because as soon as we make our building tighter on the emission basically of heating inside, or the opposite of heating coming in, we make also vapor not capable, we make a vapor transmission through the walls, and this can cause a problem of molding and bad quality of air. So it becomes much more important that we keep control of the air of the houses. That's the side effect. The second company is Aeroseal. Aeroseal basically provides a system of removing all the cracks that we have through the windows and the ducts that basically provide a reduction on the efficiency of the heating and cooling system, because there is an estimate that we lose between 25 and 40% of of heating because of those ducts. They use a very particular system, very interesting, where basically they inject a vapor with a water-based formula that pressurized goes to find every crack in the house, sealing it. It's very incredible how we have such a technology, and the improvement is huge. The side effect is the same I mentioned for the windows. Sealing the house means less air able to come in the house, so the air circulation of the house becomes critical in a situation where we get this level of tightness. We have a bonus category, which is the carbon management. This bonus category actually is one of the most interesting one. Basically is how can we now remove CO2 from the atmosphere, a negative system on the CO2 system. So negative is collecting CO2 from the air. For this, we have two companies that we are going to talk about. The first one is called Graphite, and Graphite provides a system to basically take the organic biomass, for example crop wastage or residual of wood production, and they make blocks of create the blocks of biomass. These blocks are basically, they remove the water and the bacteria to remove the process of decomposition, and they put a layer of protection this basically makes a storage of those blocks that they then don't decompose and they don't produce CO2 anymore. This is really cheap, it's really applicable in the future. One of the problems that comes to my head is how is gonna work in the long term when these blocks are stored underground. Are we sure that they are not gonna be released in any time? Obviously they've been done the research and they know that it's stable, but I wonder in the very long term what's going to happen of those blocks. The second technology that is very important in the long term is possibly the most important one in the long term, because in the long term we are gonna have some technologies that we can't avoid to produce CO2. Let's think about, for example, the container ships. Container ships are very difficult to make work with without production of CO2. It's going to be really difficult. So we are going to need a system of capturing the CO2 from the air in general, because they're going to make basically sustainable the system that we can decarbonize totally. And on this, we have the DAC, Direct Air Capture. A company called Heirloom is producing a system based on the limestone. So limestone is a material that is present for the 4% in the Earth crust, so we have an abundance of this material. And this material by its own nature basically captures the CO2 from the air through mineralization, in a process that takes years. Well, the company managed to find a way to make the process, rather than lasting a year, make it last only 3 days, only few days. They have a process from basically of based in 2 steps. First part is carbonization, carbon mineralization, where they take the material on a tray and basically they increase the temperature, basically hydrating the material, and then I explain this again. The electricity make the first part, which is the calcination, which brings the material to 900 degrees. And then there is a second phase of hydration, where basically the material is exposed in the air and captures CO2. It's a very particular system, very useful and good, because it's based on modularity. So it can be stuck in big stacks, in tall stacks. So it's gonna use very small area. There are 2 main problems with these systems. The first problem is that is intensive in electricity. There is no way we are going to remove the CO2 from the air without using a lot of electricity. So electricity must come from renewable energies. It's a common theme we have seen for many of the things we have talked about in this video. But basically means that where we have high sources of high renewable energies, possibly we need to have those system of direct air capture. The second part is the storage of the CO2. This is a tricky topic, because the CO2 we need to find a good and efficient way to store it, and it's more important, needs to be safe. There are different ways, but the most the safest one nowadays seems to be the basically filling the same gap where we had the oil before. So underground there was the oil, now the reserves are being emptied. Now we are gonna fill back those space with the CO2, and the CO2 basically will be trapped there and won't be spread around. The good part is that this technology has already been used by the oil production. It's called in EOR. It's a system of enhanced oil recovery used by the petroleum companies. So it's already well tested and we know it works. And so we could use this system to store it. There are few aspects that need to be considered. In the long-term monitoring of this is going to be really important, and the education of the communities, because basically communities are going to have CO2 stored close to their communities, and they need to know where they are, they need to know the impact, and needs to be educated in the low risk that we take, but what it means. It's important also because it can spill around in the water system, so it's critical that the population is involved and we have a very good monitor system. Finally, I have a personal thought thought about how are we gonna make this economical, because who is gonna buy the CO2? The CO2 is gonna be bought by government, I imagine. So there is a lot to talk about on how is this system gonna be profitable for companies that do it. It's a part that we need to really consider carefully. So with this, we got to the end of this video. My hope is that I provided a good description of this, of what the progress we have made, and I hope that in the future I could provide more and more insight on the good aspects, on the good news, on the technological advancement, and all the other important aspects that are involved in the climate change. And I really wish that we could have a much more wide conversation on this topic, a conversation involving more aspects in the human world. And I would like to produce more video on this topic and trying to spread on a broad range of topic what it means for us live nowadays this world and face this challenge that the human is face. If you like this topic and you would like to know more, please subscribe and comment this video if you have an idea. Thanks for watching.